continuing to follow NATO's ongoing proxy war against Russia and all of the ways that the West is trying to frame it as if Kiev has a chance here, right? They're like, look at these drone attacks. Look at how miserable Ukraine is able to make the Russian public. Look at how they're targeting Russian oil tankers in the Black Sea. But what they don't talk about is Russia's response to all of this, not just in the Black Sea, not just with the bombings that they're carrying out and the ways in which they're responding and retaliating there, but also on the front lines with a series of significant advances that are making it clear that Russia still has the upper hand here, even after this 40-day nonsense of trying to force Russia to the negotiating table. Yeah, it has not worked. If anything, it has helped to harden the Russian resolve to continue this fight. So, what does that mean for where this conflict is headed? And what does it also mean as you have the US military in a continued state of crisis with the latest reports coming off of the USS Abraham Lincoln? That's not even to mention the shortages of munitions and the impact that the war of choice against Iran has had on the US supply of Reaper drones. It is not looking good for the US empire all around. We got into all of the latest with a special guest earlier, so let's take a listen to that conversation now. Joining me now to discuss is Stanislav Krapivnik, a former US Army officer, military and geopolitical analyst, and host of the In the Eyes of Truth podcast, who joins us from Moscow. Stas, thanks so much for taking the time to join me.
Always a pleasure. And we got matching colors today, so yeah.
Well, I guess great minds think alike as we're continuing to follow the same issues. And yeah, I did want to get a chance to talk to you today because I know that media here in the West seem to be doing everything they can to amplify Ukraine's drone attacks on Russia, while, of course, downplaying Russia's drone and missile attacks on Ukraine. And there's been this increase in war around the Black Sea, with Kiev going after Russian oil tankers and Moscow targeting weapons shipments and cargo ships headed for Ukrainian ports. And the West seems to be magically concerned all of a sudden about Ukrainian grain shipments when they didn't want to talk about the grain deal when Russia was there to try to make it work. Now, I know that you were recently in the Krasnodar region on the Black Sea, and you said that you and your family heard 5 to 10 air siren alerts every day while you were at the beach. Can you take us through what it was like there, and how do you see the latest tensions?
Yeah, we were in Anapa. Well, actually, Anapa next to all the villages to the north of it that are along the coast. So it's kind of like, for Americans, it's kind of like Myrtle Beach, but no mini golf, which is kind of miss mini golf. Somebody used to open some mini golf there. But otherwise, it's kind of a lot like Myrtle Beach. And we were staying there. We stayed there, and we also stayed for a couple of days at a friend's on the northern side of Krasnodar Krai on the Azov Sea. And there are two very different points I'll make. I'll start with the couple of days we spent on the Azov Sea. We were one row of houses away from the beach. And all night long, the Ukrainians fly a lot of drones, or NATO, if you want to call it the truth behind it, flies a lot of drones across the Azov Sea. We were there, by the way, when there was a resort hit the day we came up there that was in Zaporizhzhia, also on the Azov Sea. So we're right in the middle of the Azov Sea on the south side, and the resort was on the western side of the Azov Sea in Zaporizhzhia. And the Ukrainians hit that, or NATO Ukrainians hit that at night, wound up killing about a dozen people, women, children, families, and injuring twice as many. And they hit them with heavy drones while people were sleeping. And that's, by the way, a big difference. Russia hits at night because the targets Russia's hitting, like, for example, fueling stations, gasoline stations are closed, or they're hitting warehouses, or they're hitting factories. They're usually either don't have a shift working there, or there's a minimal night shift. So if there are people killed, it's usually the onesies and twosies, either guards or wrong place, wrong time. Ukraine flies at night because it's mostly Ukraine, NATO. They're hitting apartment buildings. They're hitting single residency homes. They're aiming for when people are at home and asleep to try to maximize their murder rate. There's no other way to call that than what it is. And all night long when we were sleeping, well, yeah, family had a hard time sleeping. I'm military, so I get used to these things. But so there are Pantsir systems up and down that area, and a Pantsir is this big truck with a radar system built in, four missile launchers, and an autocannon. And they were taking these drones out with the autocannons. And all night you hear from the autocannon and kaboom, boom, boom. Maybe a minute apart, 2 minutes apart, 30 seconds apart. I mean, there must have been at least 100 plus every night that they were taken out. And you hear the explosion from them because they're hitting the fuel tanks, they're hitting the explosive charges in them. And that was constant. So yeah, some of them do get through, but that's when they're heading inland in the south. That's where they're flying across, and that's an area that they get intercepted, heavily intercepted in those areas. When we were on in Krasnodarsky Krai in Anapa, Anapa is to the south, is on the Black Sea. So we were about 100 kilometers, so 60 miles southeast of the bridge. And yeah, there was the sirens kick in about 4 to 10 times a day or at night, whenever. When the drones are flying, and you see some of these drones flying over your head, airplane type drones. These drones are smaller because they're not going long distance, so they're not as big. The drones that fly long distance, they're 4 meters long, so about 12 feet, almost 13 feet long. But these are basically small Cessna planes, packed with fuel and explosives. And the further in they fly, the less explosives, the more fuel, obviously. And a two-banger piston engine, kind of like a lawnmower engine. Um, these drones that were flying overhead, they're smaller because they're aiming closer in. The thing is, Russians don't get phased. It's pretty hard to phase Russians. So the sirens are going off and everybody's looking around like, okay, whatever. I'm on the beach. Screw them. Of course, they did wind up in Gelendzhik murdering 8 civilians, four of them children. Little children are building sandcastles, so they struck with a drone, and that drone was not shot down. I mean, you watch the video, you see that drone purposely coming in, turning, and going straight into those civilians. So that was premeditated murder. But that was the reality. It was yeah, there's I mean it's drone central. They're constantly flying overhead. So that's a drone situation. And this was during the Marco Rubio's 40 days of forcing Russia to the negotiation slash suicide table. Well, that failed. What it did do is, by the way, it boosted recruitment for volunteers to go fight. Every time the U.S. And its proxy do this, it just has the opposite effect on Russians. It just pisses people off even more, and a lot more people go volunteer to fight. So that's the reality of it. But drones, 2 months ago, I was down in the Donbass area where we went down there. Me and three other guys. Christopher Halali was one of them that came down in there. I think you know Christopher. Um, and we were driving through there, and we had, I'll call it Palantir as a terrorist organization. Thiel is a terrorist. His drones are AI-powered drones, the Hornets. They're programmed in when their charge goes down to about 20%. They're no longer looking for something that looks military. They're looking for anything that's moving. Grandma with a pram, that's a good enough target. They quite literally, about 2.5 months ago, one of his drones killed an 11 and 12-year-old boy, two boys riding a bicycle. They're both on the same bicycle, and one of his Hornet drones came in on it. So outside of calling him and his company that are making these drones, taking these drones there and releasing these drones that are programmed by his people, other than calling him a terrorist organization, I don't know what else you call him. They are targeting civilians. And in those areas, and now basically everywhere, Russia has gone Mad Max. They've turned in the bigger areas, particularly around refineries, places like that. Uh, they've turned a lot of things into technicals. Now they have proper pickups. Technical, for people don't know what a technical is. Technical is it's a term that came out of Africa. It's when they were taking pickups, and Toyota sells a lot of white pickups and hundreds of, if not thousands, to these different countries or different organizations. They know what's going on with them. They take these pickups And in the bed of the pickup, they weld in a mount for a weapons mount, and you can put machine guns, recoilless rifles in there, missile launchers. I've seen a few that try to make a multiple launch rocket system, but they wind up burning the truck down. So there's limits on what you can do. Uh, Thank you for trying. You failed. But yeah, these technicals they ride around in Africa. But so yeah, well, Russia's made technicals out of pickups, and now they guard with light machine guns, and they guard all of these facilities because these drones, while they're dangerous because they're packed with explosives and fuel, they're relatively easy to shoot out of the sky. They're slow. They make a lot of noise. The Hornets make a lot less noise, but they're still easy enough to shoot out of the sky if you have something to shoot them with. On in the Donbass and those areas, they went a little more Mad Max. They just took every hatchback car they could find, took out the hatchback, mounted a machine gun mount on there, and there's a guy with a machine gunner in the back and a driver, and those provide escort to the military trucks and equipment. Civilians don't get those, unfortunately, so that becomes a problem. When we were there, we were warned between sunrise and like 9 in the morning is the worst time to be around. Those drones are really going after civilians. And then I guess they try to switch over to the military during the day. So we had to avoid, and the roads that we were normally at, like where my aunt and uncle live in Yasanavata. So between Gorlovka and Yasanavata is about 20 kilometers. I've been down that road, flying down that road with artillery popping off behind me. But that's one thing. And even the drones back then, you could kind of outrun them. But with these Hornet drones, they're quieter, they're harder to spot, and they go for civilians. That road was closed fully. I was told don't go down that road; it's suicide. They had in 5 days, I think, they had 6 civilian cars killed on that road. When I mean cars killed, all the occupants were murdered, and these are civilian occupants. So that we were much further inland. We are maybe like 35, 40 kilometers from the front line, and that was still a danger zone going up and down because of Thiel's drones. Now we heard a lot of news about them on the Mariupol Rostov interstate that runs in the south, and they did start hitting. They were hitting a lot of military trucks, and they were hitting civilian trucks, fuel trucks, and then just regular trucks and remote mining, dropping mines as they were flying over the roads. And the vast majority of traffic, 95+% of the traffic, are civilian cars, civilian trucks. I had some friends that were making a run to Zaporizhzhia, bringing in some equipment, and they were coming back, and they're all former army officers, so they didn't freak out. But the car in front of them blew up, full of civilians. It hit a mine, and you don't stop and stick around. The emergency services crews will come out, but you don't stop and stick around because there's other drones in the area. If you stop, you become a target for these Theo Palantir drones. That area has been now cleared. The gun trucks showed up everywhere. They moved in gun trucks. Last count, I was reading 1,400 drones that were shot down. And you get some videos of these drones being shot down. So that's the situation with the drones. Do you want me to talk about the fuel?
Yeah, yeah, I wanted to get into that too because I know
Yeah.
that that's something that we had talked about last time we were on the show. The ways in which the West is trying to amplify really this war on the Russian public, right? This idea, like
Mhm.
you were saying, that we're going to force Russia to the negotiating table, we're going to make the Russian civilians as miserable as possible. What has that been like there? I know you're there in Moscow, but what has it been like on the ground, kind of experiencing the at least the impacts that are there from this ongoing war.
There were some limitations of fuel. I'm not gonna lie and say everything was hunky dory, nothing happened. There were partially. Well, first of all, as I've said before, when they're striking the refineries, they're not striking the actual refinery. Because refineries, go if for those that live in the South, go drive by Hardin, Texas, or go Lake Charles, Louisiana, Fayette, or Louisville, not Louisville, Lafayette. Go look at what a refinery looks like. It's 6 to 10 miles of territory. It's about 10 to 15 kilometers for the rest of the world. Um, it's hundreds of kilometers of pipes. The pipes are pressurized. The valves are computerized. As soon as the pressure falls in any of these areas, it cuts off. The computer cuts off the valves. There's no more pressure, so you get hit it, you'll get a little bit of explosion, a little flame, and then it just cuts off. So you don't get the pretty picture for the Western press. So what they go after is they go after the fuel depots. It's the big containers, the big round containers. Yeah, they got one where the lid blew off, and it does happen. The thing is nobody puts them out. There's no point in putting them out. You cut off the pipes going in and out that are underneath it, so there's no more fuel pumping in or out of it, and you just let it burn out, and then you replace it. There's no point in trying to put it out. Just let it burn out. But it's the great picture the Western media loves. The big flame, the big smoke. But the fact is they're easy to replace. They're relatively cheap, all things considered, and they're relatively easy to replace. So the damage done to these refineries, it puts them out of business for 2, 3 weeks, maybe a month at the most, and then they're back up and running. Sometimes a week, and they're back up and running. It's not any kind of a long thing. It takes a lot to take out a refinery. Now, Iran has done that in Qatar. I've seen the videos and the photographs from the air, and they did a lot of damage, but they were hitting and hitting and hitting. That's not something you hit once and you do something like that. All things considered, especially the charge. So there was a combination of things that happened. First of all, remember last year they said the same thing in August. Oh, we've cut the Russian fuel refining down to by 40%, and all the media, blah blah blah. And then Reuters came out and quietly said, "Well, actually, we've counted the numbers. It's only 3%. Don't tell anyone." You know. And then the Russian side came out, well, actually like 1.5%. So something between 1.5 and 3% is all they hit for all that. And then the story went away. This year they started the story earlier, so there were some limitations, but they weren't anything long term. There was some panic amongst the population. People were hoarding that, and some businesses were hoarding. So that, I mean, I've seen that with my own eyes when a guy pulls up to a gas station, he pops up his the back of his pickup truck, and there's 5 big containers. He's now filling them all up. Like, yeah, and multiply that by a couple hundred, and all of a sudden you're out of fuel. And yes, there were cases like that. Um, the and it's summertime. So summertime, Russia actually a lot of times imports gasoline during the summer. Russia's one of the, if not the biggest producer of diesel in the world, but not of gasoline. That's something that actually needs more refineries to be built. So on normal circumstances, Russia has enough gasoline, but in the summer they always wind up importing. So you had the perfect storm. You had a few refineries that were decommissioned for a couple of weeks because of this. You have summer driving. You have some panic in the population that were starting to hoard, and you get fuel shortages. But they weren't anything catastrophic. When we went down 2 months ago, I carried 40 liters of extra fuel with me. Uh, Wound up using about half of that, but that was because we were in Donetsk, and that was pretty hard up on fuel over there. The fuel they had was pretty dirty, so I was pre-warned by some friends there that don't fuel up in Donetsk. And Rostov was a little difficult to fuel up because everybody's driving through Rostov to go to the beaches, so there's a much higher demand in that city. But still, we had enough fuel. It just took a lot. It took maybe 3, 4 hours longer because of different lines. Now heading down, a month later, I'm heading down with the family. I carried one container of 20 liters, just in case I was topping off every quarter. And then go down a quarter tank. I'd find a place to top off. Maybe spend an extra 2 hours on the road between lines and things like that. And lines the same thing. You get to one fuel station and there's a line of 20, 30 cars. You miss that, and you go to the next one, there's 2 cars sitting there because everybody's sitting in the line in front. Welcome to human nature. 3 weeks later, when we're driving back, or 2.5 weeks later, we're driving back, no problems with fuel. I was dropping down to a little over a quarter tank before fueling up. I had no problems with fuel. And once you get past Voronezh, I mean, the only people with no fuel at their stations right now, in these areas particularly, are very small chains and mom and pops. And the government's now getting on the big boys because what the majors are doing was using, don't let any emergency go to waste. So they were doing because obviously the mom and pop stores, the little chains, they buy from the majors, and the majors have their own chains. So they're basically doing is starving their competition, their local competition, and the government's now gotten onto them for doing just that, starving their competition. So they're forcing them to sell to honor the contracts they had before instead of saying, "Oh, we don't have enough." So that should be an issue. That issue popped up end of last week. They start talking about it. It's like, look, we realize you don't have that big of a problem anymore. And then in the intermediate, Russia did buy 400,000 tons of fuel from India that India refined with Russian oil. Now, having said that, every action has a counteraction, and the Europeans are all laughing. Ha ha! We got Russia over a barrel. Ha ha! They have to import fuel. Well, the little problem for the knuckle draggers over in the EU is that fuel was going to Europe. Well, the non-Russian Europe, because they buy their fuel from Russian oil, but it's now freedom molecules because it's been refined in India. So instead of going to Europe, it's now going back to Russia. So Europe didn't get the EU. Right, I'm not going to call it Europe. It's not. It's the EU didn't get 400,000 tons of fuel. Whoops.
Yeah, you're like, was it worth it? Because you guys decided that you were going to go after Russia, and well, now these are the consequences, not even to mention the impact of the ongoing US war and US and Israeli war on Iran and how that has now impacted everything. But yeah, I did also want to get into the current situation on the battlefield because as you're noting there, right, we have this back and forth, this ongoing drone war, this attempt to make the civilians in Russia miserable, but that's not affecting the situation on the battlefield in the sense it's not harming Russia there. It's also not helping Kiev there. So, how do you see that situation, especially when it comes to the latest advances Russia has been able to make along the front lines and the overall significance?
Well, first of all, because Ukraine switched tactics. So they switched over, smart enough of them for the moment. They started using these Gazelle trucks, which are these light cargo trucks with cargo boxes in the back, and they cut off a side out of it, put some canvas down, and they pack two of these big drones in there, get up as far as they can up to near the line of contact, launch and scoot, shoot and scoot, launch and scoot, and by the time the drones are in the air, they're already hightailing it out of there. So it's pretty hard to kill these trucks, and there are hundreds of them. And then during the day, they hide them in garages, they hide them in underground parking and warehousing, and so on. But the problem for them is the weak point in their is their supply chain. They top off and the drones and themselves at all these local fuel stations. So Russia started taking out the fuel stations. And first they went after Kharkov and Sumy provinces and took out over 400 fueling stations. Then they started expanding out to Kiev, Chernigov, Zaporizhzhia, Dnipropetrovsk, and Poltava, which force these trucks to have to now launch from a lot further inside because they have no fuel. They can't go up toward the line of contact. They now have to launch from deep inside of Russia, which gives several hundred more kilometers of warning to take these drones out. Two, it collapsed the local economy because no fuel. Welcome to reality. So what that does, by the way, it helps Russia too because it forces the civilians out. They can't live there anymore. They can't get food. They can't work. There's no fuel, so they start leaving that area, which is the war zone. And as Zelensky about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, I guess he was pretty high on the Colombian marching powder. Our cheerleader interrupted. He admitted that, oh, we can't get the civilians out of the war zone because then the Russians advance a lot faster. Translation: we use our own civilians as human shields to hide behind. The soldier's supposed to stand in front of the baby, not the baby in front of the soldier. But Ukraine is, a little different. And that allowed the Russian military to start advancing faster for obvious reasons. You want the civilians out of there. And Russia started going after the warehousing because Ukraine went after wild berries, as we know, as they had told everybody. Well, yeah, wild berries. They hit a couple of these wild berries mega warehouses, And to her credit, Tatiana Kim, who's the owner of, she's a billionaire, dollar billionaire, owner of these. Though she didn't have to because the contract stipulates force majeure, she still paid out to all the people who lost their merchandise in her warehouses for the stuff that wasn't her. While it's like Amazon, there's Amazon stuff, and then there's people selling through Amazon who or maybe keeping their materials with Amazon in their warehouse. So she compensated people, plus the families of her workers that suffered or died. She generously compensated the families. But what Amazon, or I'm sorry, Amazon, what Wildberries did was they went back to a dispersed model, which they had originally. They just instead of keeping everything in one big warehouse for the area, they just went to a bunch of small warehouses. As we were driving back, there's still Wildberry trucks all over the place, and Ozone trucks. Ozone's their main competitor. So yeah, it did damage, but it didn't do the super damage. Well, Russia started going after Nova Pochta, which is the Ukrainian version. But Novaya Porsche really does move military equipment, and they put videos out. I mean, these guys they videotape themselves how they're supporting the war effort in Ukraine, and they show them and they're moving, helmets and body armor. Not like one vest that some family bought for their son on the front. No, hundreds of them. So government orders, obviously. So they're working as basically the logistics arm for the military. So Russia's gone after their warehouse and destroyed them. But Russia's also started going after the food warehouses. And this is forcing people to leave the cities because they can't, there's no food. The groceries aren't there. And there's videos coming out of Kiev, places like that show empty shelves because the distribution centers have been destroyed. But that's the point. You want the people to leave because when the people leave, again, Zelensky doesn't get his human shields. So that's a big plus that you're aiming for. So that's one part. So now on the battlefield, Russia's continuing to advance up and down the area around Sumy. They're about 5-6 kilometers outside of Sumy in the north and the northeast. Sumy is key. Sumy is about a city of about 200,000. It's key because it's a logistics hub. So you have major interstates and rail lines going from Chernigov and Kiev and Dnipropetrovsk into Poltava into uh, Sumy, and from Sumy one line goes up to Kursk, which is the line that they drove up the interstate they drove up to when they tried to invade Kursk Oblast, and the other one goes and feeds Kharkiv, which is southeast of Sumy. So taking Sumy basically cuts off Kharkiv from the west. Kharkiv was obviously cut off from the north and the east, so it only leaves the south. And even there, part of the roads have to go across bridges over the Severna Donetsk River that can be cut. So it starts to really isolate Kharkiv for the future Kharkiv operation. And right now, the Russian forces have basically cut off northeastern Kharkiv province. There's a large encirclement of Ukrainian troops. While it's not fully physically cut off, there's about 10 kilometers between two Russian pincers. Everything's covered in artillery and aviation and drones. So all the Ukrainians stuck up there, and there may be several thousand of them. They can hide out, I guess, in the forest until they get cleared, or maybe they can in onesies and twosies sneak out, but the majority of them are you can quote me as screwed. And there's a further pincer movement that's even further south that's now being formed to take that next group where they got those that got out of the first pincer encirclement are going to be stuck in the next one. So that northeastern portion of Kharkiv is being taken and cleared up to the Severan Donetsk River. When you go further south, the big fight right now, there's two big fights right now going on. First big fight is the agglomeration of Druzhinka, Kramatorsk, and Slavinsk. Now, why is this important? The 4 years that fight has been going on, and Russia's going slow to conserve manpower. Um, the Ukrainians, spent 12 years fortifying these towns. Now, the key here is these towns are also fortified in depth. It wasn't just north and south, it was in depth. So every time Russia took a town, the Ukrainians would fall back 5-6 kilometers, maybe less, to the next town, and the next town, the next town. But there are no more towns. If you look at the map behind it, it's just open fields. And Russia's already got those open fields under control of aviation, long range artillery, rocket artillery, and drones. So the guys that are in these towns are screwed. Um, the rainy season starts in about a month, month and a half, depending, year to year, middle of September, end of September. Those fields turn to mud, quagmires. You're not getting out. You only got packed roads, and those are easy enough to control. So anybody that's stuck in those three towns, there's pincher movements coming up and down the north and south along because there's one interstate that runs right across all three of those towns, connecting them, and runs up to in the north Krasny Liman, which is taken, and there's a Russian pincher coming down, and in the south to Konstantinovka, which Russia took, and there's a pincher going up. There's a forward assault that's about 5 kilometers out and closing onto all of these. And now there's a back spur also coming up that it's coming up behind directly to Druzhinka and behind Druzhinka, which is going to cut them off from the rear. So they're screwed. I mean, just I don't know how else to put it. If they're not out of there within the next month, their only choice is going to be to die in place or surrender. Hopefully, they'll surrender. And then Orikhiv, which is the last fortified town on its way to Zaporizhzhia. And it's been one of those holdouts for a while. Russian troops last week and a half were able to punch their way through into southern Orikhiv, and now half the town's in Russian hands. And the Ukrainians are rushing every reserve they have left to try to break through there. Because once that town falls, it's about 30 kilometers to Zaporizhzhia, on a straight shot up N08 highway. But there's just small towns, unprepared towns. There's no fortified lines until you get to Zaporizhzhia. And Zaporizhzhia is a pretty flat, open area. There's three bridges across the Dnieper. You can't really swim in those areas because it's cliffs to the river. So you can cut it off effectively from the west. It'll be cut off from the south. And there's only two major interstates coming into it from the north and northeast. Well, actually, northeast and further northeast, or almost east, and those can be cut off pretty easily too by artillery and aviation. So Zaporozhye would be out in the open. The two big fights right now are Ryokov in Zaporozhye Oblast and these three towns, remaining towns in the Donbass area. So that's the situation, and the Russian military is moving forward in every single direction. There's about eight approaches that they're using right now, eight directions of movement.
Wow, that's so interesting. And I appreciate the breakdown there because, yeah, it's something that we simply don't get in the West that they don't want to talk about. Now, before we go, I did want to quickly mention the situation involving the US military because I know that there have been a lot of reports of just havoc aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln, talking about sailors trying to jump overboard, just horrible
Yeah.
conditions all around, especially when it comes to their food. Now, you served in the military. What is your reaction when you see these reports and kind of what's coming out, and what does it tell us about the position the U.S. is in here?
The U.S. Army goes off the well. When you're on post, you get fed well. I can't say anything. It maybe not the taste. It's actually pretty decent food, and you get fed well. Now, when you're in the field, it's either for the army. It's either MREs or what's called T-rats, and T-rats is just uncomprehendable crap that they've warmed on in these trays. God only knows how long the trays have been around. When you get brown, you get gray mass with a brown goo on top of it. It's like, what is this? You don't like it, don't eat it. And the military runs, and I think every military in the world to some degree runs off the concept of if you're hungry enough, you'll eat it. And damn, they're right. When you're hungry enough, it's like, I hate you bastards. Get stop. But I'm hungry. And you can have some more because I'm still hungry. You haven't eaten all day. So it's amazing what you're willing to eat when you're hungry enough. But the Navy, these guys have pizza nights, right? They have burger nights. They have the Navy, the pudgy boys because they get fed well. Well, apparently that's all in the past. The Ford had these issues. The Lincoln had these issues, and apparently that's not limited to just to those two ships. Apparently, the entire supply chain at sea for the military or for the U.S. Navy has collapsed. I was talking with Larry Johnson yesterday, and Larry's been contacted by bunch of people from whose sons and daughters are on different ships. So I mean, it's not just these two ships; they're on different ships, and they're saying the same thing. One woman was telling them her son, who was a Marine, he was a pretty buffed up Marine. He lost 30 pounds, 15 kilos, 14 kilos, being out on one float. That's a lot. I mean, those pictures that get posted. I mean, that's literally what these guys are being fed. And on top of that, there's somebody calculated up what their daily calorie count is coming out to. They're getting fed about 16 to 100 to 2,000 calories. For a grown man, that's not enough.
Yeah.
For a grown man that's active, running up and down, doing manual labor on a ship, running up and down these staircases and whatever, that's not even close to enough. So yeah, these guys are starving, and the families have been sending them care packages, and care packages aren't getting there. They're disappearing en route. This is, when the Soviet Union collapsed, the Russian military would send soldiers home. You know why? Because your parents can feed you. We don't have any food. We can't keep you in the barracks. We can't feed you because of this internal collapse. They'd send guys home for weeks at a time so their mothers would feed them. So at least somebody would feed them. You had soldiers on the streets begging for money for food or for food. That's what collapse looks like. We're looking at collapse. They're looking late empire collapse stage where everybody's just stealing everything that's nailed down. Look, if you've got emergency rations like that, first of all, by the time the food gets there, it's spoiled. Well, buy local, use helicopters if you need to. You should have enough ships with freezers, for God's sakes, refrigeration units to get food out to these ships. Plus, these ships are out for 10 to 12 months without seeing port. That's when you start getting suicides and things like that. I mean, people look, even if I'm not going to talk about a destroyer or a cruiser, which is much more limited real estate. But even an aircraft carrier, which is pretty big, but it's still a rust bucket in the middle of an ocean. There's only so far you can walk on it, and you're out there for 7, 8 months on this metal thing. And why I never joined the Navy, I would never think to join the Navy, for God's sakes. Yeah, at least if a tank is burning or you're on foot and you're infantry, you can still, you're on the ground. You're not going to sink. But I digress. But there's only so far you can go. And now they're talking about moldy showers. The food is subpar to anybody that's active. Moldy showers, broken latrines. The stores are empty because there are actual stores inside the aircraft carriers. And on and on and on and on, and 14 to 16 hour shifts. So these guys are burning calories. Hungry people that are chronically hungry, they start getting into a depressive state. Plus, you're stuck on a piece of real estate that's pretty small. There's no place to go. People start going stir crazy. They start getting that PTSD. Suicide rates go up, particularly if there's already any depression, family issues, something like that. 5,000 guys. There's going to be, and girls. Somebody's going to have some mental issues, like it or not. Girlfriend broke up with them. Somebody died in the family, and they're stuck out in the middle of nowhere, and haven't seen land except maybe off in the distance. So yeah, this is absolute abuse.
Yeah.
Absolute abuse by a president that never served, but posts AI pictures of himself standing there with Patton and MacArthur with a bunch of stripes and a bunch of ribbons on his chest. He had 5 deferments not to go to Vietnam. So yeah, guy that's criticizing the leadership of Vietnam. There's a lot to criticize of the leadership of Vietnam. He ain't got any room to criticize it. He didn't serve. He never put a uniform on except for military school. He could have gone in as a lieutenant. He chose not to. So now he's in his mental derangement. He's pulling himself up as some kind of general. And meanwhile, the reality is they're abusing the crap out of these sailors and these Marines.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, right, you look at the possible state of collapse. Well, this is how it begins, and this is
Yep.
how it only continues as The US is continuing to wage all of these endless wars. I know that there is a lot at stake here all around, and I really appreciate you taking the time to join me today to break down all of the latest here. Stanislav Krapivnik, a former US Army officer, military and geopolitical analyst, and host of the In the Eyes of Truth podcast. Thank you so much for your time and insight.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.